time. Time after time. Thinking things will stay the same. That the game isn't played that way. You've got to stay on track.
Welcome to the Social Engineer podcast. We're on number 11. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Thank you for the great and overwhelming feedback. So we got our panel with us today.
And the crickets chirp.
What was that?
And the crickets chirp.
Yeah, they did chirp, big time. So that's Mutt's introduction. We got Mutz with us today. How you doing, Mutz?
Not bad at all.
We have Elwood with us, or Jim. What's going on, Jim?
Hi there.
I thought that would be...
Jim always sounds like he's on vacation.
I know, doesn't he? Do you even work for a living?
It depends on your definition, I guess.
Yeah. And we have Dave, or Relic, with us, too. How you doing, Dave?
Hello. I think this is the first podcast where I haven't been somewhere crazy.
Well, I was going to ask you, are you on a helicopter or being life-flighted in for heart surgery or something today? None
of that. I'm actually sitting in a conference room at work. Nothing exciting.
No more births or anything like that?
No, nothing. I can't complain.
Wow. Yeah, kind of boring.
It is. I'm sorry. I apologize. Next time it'll be something crazy.
Thank you. Yeah. We kind of expect this from you every month now.
I can't do every single podcast. I mean, then it would start to get old.
Yeah.
You got to keep the audience on its toes.
Places to call us from. So we got a ton of stuff happening this month. Maddie, the CTF, how strong is your foo? Number 2. How was the, we talked about that last month for the Hackers for Charity. How did that work out?
It was great. It really was great. It was a long and grueling event. We had several people stick through till the bitter end. Really, really, really enjoyable event. We really enjoyed it. Props to Sinner, the guy who won. Worked really, really hard. Second place, it was amazing. The guy in second place, 5 minutes after the event finished, after the 48 hours, he popped the last box, and he would have been in first place. It was 5 minutes late, but it was a really awesome event. We all really enjoyed it.
Man, that's great. That's great, though. So, Sinner, congratulations to him. That's awesome. Yeah. So he'll be with us at Black Hat, I guess, huh?
Yep, seems so.
That's awesome.
Are you guys planning on any more events?
Probably. We'll have to wait after Black Hat, though, because we're also busy with getting everything prepared and all the events that we have at Black Hat and DEF CON. So we'll probably have some more after.
That's a good plug right there. I mean, you guys are doing quite a bit at Black Hat this year, aren't you? With AWE and PWB.
Yep. Those classes sold out fast, real fast. I was kind of shocked. Again this year, it just kind of shocks me every year, but it was nice to see. The PWB sold out pretty quick, as well as did all. So let's see, Maddie, I have to bring this up, but you have a new Elite exploit out on Exploit DB. You want to plug?
You couldn't put it to rest, could you?
I couldn't. This exploit is so elite that I think we're going to link to it in the podcast notes.
I thought you were going to wait till the middle of it, but you're so excited you had to get it at the beginning, huh?
No, I had to do it. It's just too exciting. It's 14236 is the exploit number. If you go to Exploit DB, 14236, you got to check it out, man. This Mutz spent all of 30 seconds on this one, and I think when people see it, they'll understand the joke. Unless you want to explain in detail, you just wanted to let them get the joke.
No, really. It's fine. You can go on.
Okay. Let's see. The CTF for how strong is your foo? No. How strong is your schmooze at DEF CON 18 has, of course...
That's been getting quite a lot of press, hasn't it?
Oh, man, I'm telling you. I don't think any of us, when we sat down and decided that we would try this out, that any of us really understood to the extent that we would be getting this kind of press. Really, I didn't realize that it would blow up this much.
Larry King is calling now. It's getting kind of ridiculous. We don't really want to talk to him, but
Yeah, don't say that. If Larry calls, I'll talk to him.
I heard he got
You're tiring.
No, seriously though, he got interviewed by like what, CSO magazine or something like that.
Yeah, CSO magazine gave us a call. Give a shout out to Joan Goodchild there. She gave us a call and wanted to interview about not just about the contest, but she took a different spin. It was interesting. She wanted to interview about social-engineer.org as a whole, like what our mission is and what we're trying to do with the website and how that led us down the path to this contest. Really nice article. I'll link to it in the podcast notes if you haven't seen it yet. It's all over Twitter, and people are blowing up about the article, but it's real nice on CSO
Definitely.
magazine.
Well
yeah, real nice write-up she did on that.
Kind of follows up the dark reading one that happened before.
Yep, and then there was one on Information Weekly, and there's been a few. I can't remember them all, but there's been a few all over, which really should get the excitement going because as of this podcast, the dossiers are out. They're out and about in the open wild. And,
wait. What does that mean?
The dossiers have been sent out to the contestants for the CTF.
So people know what they're supposed to be doing?
People know their targets as of now.
So
they know their targets. They know who they're supposed to be gathering information on. They know probably developing their attack vectors. It's open season on the social engineer front, as we say.
No, I'm just saying I'm in lockdown mode right now. I'm not answering any phone calls.
Yeah. We wouldn't put your company on the list.
You better.
Brides at offsec.com.
Yeah. Make it big, and we'll take it off the list.
So wait. That list is now published to the contestants, so they actually know at least one company on the list.
Yes, the contestants only know their company. We have not published, and we will not publish the list publicly of who the targets are.
So many people would be interested in that list, though.
Oh, I think people would be very interested to know. But despite all the begging, we are not doing that, not yet at least. We'll see, again, bribes at socialengineer.org.
Offsec, bribes at offsec.com.
I'm sorry, Mutz?
Bribes at Offsec, that's the final address.
Oh, yeah, sorry, bribes at Offsec. Don't forget to CC Chris at offsec.com. So,
how did you end up getting the list of companies? What did you do? What was your selection process?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I got to give a monster shout out to Ming, Dan Sharp. He was like a tireless slave. So the process started with when every contestant registered, we asked them to suggest 2 companies they think would make good targets, and we put them in a pool. But then we also chose targets ourselves, ones that we felt would represent a large selection of industry or businesses in this country, and that if they fell to some of these social engineer tactics, that it would represent why it's such a threat and a danger. So we didn't want to choose like small mom and pop shops. We chose all larger organizations, larger companies, to demonstrate the threats that are available or that are happening each and every day. But we couldn't just stop there. It wasn't a matter of just choosing companies. We had to verify that these companies had, workable phone numbers, that they had people available on the weekends and days that we would be making these calls, because each person is given a specific who really sat with me endlessly at evenings making these calls and testing the waters to make sure that each contestant has a company that they can call a target that's valid. So really, without Dan, I don't know if much of this would have happened as smoothly as it did. So we really appreciate your help, Ming. Keep it up.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll be abusing you at
for a long time. He is a great guy. That's good to hear that he's involved in this.
Yeah. I'm happy to have him here too, because Elwood was the one who made the argument. We were taking like votes of who we should use as slaves, and Elwood was like, get Dan involved. He's a good slave.
Now he's gonna blame me. Now he's gonna blame me. This is not good.
Yeah, that's what he said. Dan's a good slave. So I'm like, Dan, hey, you want to be a slave? There's like no money, no pay, no benefits. There's like absolutely nothing good that will happen to you at all, but you get to do a lot of work late at night.
Dude.
You get abused, you're going to get made fun of, and we're probably going to, physically abuse you at some point. He's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And I'm like, man, Elwood was right.
Well, God bless him, man.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely going to blame you for all this, Elwood.
Oh, boy. So
shout out to him. But this led to a whole bunch of things that are going to happen at DEF CON. I think we're going to, I don't think I'm going to edit this part. I think we're going to announce this now, guys. Our phone calls are going to be Friday all day and Saturday all day, but our contest is for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And to avoid people having to try to find good numbers and make phone calls on Sunday, we thought Sunday we would use to kind of go over the calls that were made, anything we can learn from it, discuss it as a group. But then we have a real special event. We're going to actually do can we call it live, Elwood?
We can say recorded live.
I recorded live, so semi-live, partially live. Is that even right? Semi-dead?
Zombie.
We're going to do a zombie podcast. I like that. A zombie podcast at DEF CON. So we're inviting everybody. Anybody that wants to come, we're going to set it up. We're going to have our crew there. We're going to do a podcast from DEF CON. And we're not going to icecast it or anything, broadcast it, but we are going to record it and have community involvement. So there'll be more information on this after this podcast is released about how you can submit your questions. We'll have a mic there. People can come. We'll talk. We'll field questions on social engineering topics. And I think it'll be real exciting for the community. It will be our 1-year anniversary. So it'll be real interesting to see how that plays out at DEF CON.
Wow.
That's impressive. Yeah. 1 year, huh?
I know. We were just talking about that. It was like, it doesn't seem realistic that we've been around 1 year doing this. But kind of cool. Not complaining.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, what's today's podcast about?
Yeah, well, let me just intro this with another shout out to the newsletter. Okay, so let me intro the today's topic with this. I mean, first, before I get into the first article in the newsletter, I gotta give a massive shout out to the nurse, Brad. That guy has been like a massive supporter of ours.
Awesome.
Since the beginning, he's been supporting us with info, just always there to really help us out. And this month, he submitted an article which, I don't personally gamble. Brad gave an article that was really phenomenal on using social engineering while playing poker. And it fit well, especially because everyone's going to Vegas. He's like, hey, I wrote this. I thought you might like this with everyone going to Vegas. You can use it if you want. It might be crap. And I'm like, no way, man. This is unbelievable. Really good stuff. 5 tips to use social engineering when playing cards. So take a look at that. I've gotten some nice feedback on Twitter and through the Tribute on that article. But
I'll tell you this. Brad has it right, because every time I see him, I smile.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he does. He's got that. He has like the NLP down pat, like where he has programmed himself. So what he wants you to see is what you see.
I met him at Nauticon. I met him at Nauticon again, and he gave me a free card where it actually measures your behavior based off of voice pattern recognition.
Oh,
so
really?
you can tell if you're lying or not. And he's been great, man. He's awesome. And basically, I moved my wife to another state just to make sure. But it's good. It's really good to meet him.
Oh yeah, I know. I have to put a blindfold on my wife when she comes out to Vegas this year. I don't want her to
that voice, man, it's killer. That voice is killer. I don't know what it is.
I know. Anyway, Brad, we love you. Thanks for the article.
We love you, buddy.
But we kind of released something new. So Mutz and I were talking a little bit about the usage of different aspects of social engineering, things like neuro-linguistic programming, body language, micro-expressions. And a lot of these sciences have been studied by professionals for decades, but they didn't really compile them into maybe one area, like just for social engineering. And the more we've been researching and writing for the framework, and the more articles we've been writing and using this in our own practice, we coined a phrase now, mixing all this together. neuro-linguistic hacking. And, it kind of, we wrote an article, which is on the newsletter, which will be on the website when this podcast is released, that kind of defines exactly what neuro-linguistic hacking is. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but just to give like a brief overview, it's basically mixing all of the points of our five senses, like visual, auditory, our feeling, smell, taste, and then the language that is used to cause those emotions or manipulate those senses, and then the programming in our minds that are the neurological responses to those things, like a micro-expression, an emotion on a person's face, a word, a voice, something like those, and how all of those tie in together and combine in order to manipulate a person into a certain mindset, a frame, an emotional structure, and we named it neuro-linguistic hacking. So it's more than just social engineering. It's like the sciences behind it. So we wrote this article in the newsletter about that, kind of introducing how we're developing training and some other things on this topic, and then that ties in perfectly with our guest for this month. So our guest for this month is Dale Carson. Now, many people might not know the name off the top of their head, but Dale Carson is an ex-FBI agent. He was a special agent for the FBI. He was one of the lead instructors for interrogation with the FBI, and also did a lot of instruction on with the FBI on how to catch sex crimes, so those kinds of things. He is no longer in FBI.
SWAT as well.
I'm sorry?
You also worked with this team as well quite a bit.
Yeah, he did. And he's not in the FBI presently. He's out of that part of law enforcement, and now he's a defense attorney down south in Florida. And he wrote a book which has got some controversy behind it called Arrest Proof Yourself. So, we invited Dale onto the podcast because we feel that this is a very extreme form of social engineering. And his book talks about really how to use the things that I just talked about with neuro-linguistic hacking, like your facial expressions, your body language, the words that first come out of your mouth to manipulate the situation so you don't end up in jail. So this is different than like any social engineering gig that we talk about on the show where, if you fail at a social engineering audit, the biggest loss is, you didn't get in the company and that's it. There's no other repercussions. Maybe you look a little goofy. But with this, your social engineer fails, you can end up in prison. So the whole atmosphere of this social engineer is a little bit different. So we invited Dale on to talk about that and his book to see what we can learn from him about these things. So we'll be getting him on shortly.
So that's social engineering under extreme conditions.
Yes, yeah, that's very. Hey, I like that. I think we might actually utilize that in our title: Extreme Social Engineering, Defying Human Nature. How do you think about that? You like that?
Yeah,
I like it.
Yep.
So I think we'll go with that as our topic, and then we'll get Dale on now. Okay, so we have Dale Carson with us today. It's nice to have you with us, Dale.
Well, I'm delighted to do this.
Well, thank you.
You speak to my heart when you talk about the issues of security, because we have raised a generation of young folks, and I include you all in that number, to whom self-reliance is not something that is a big concern as it was to the generation before me, and certainly the generation before that. So I am seeing a lot of things that concern me about, your personal security, frankly, whether that involves getting out of your car in a grocery store and someone taking your pocketbook, or if it takes the form of an investment counselor who's really running a Ponzi scheme. I've seen a lot of interesting things over the last 30 years, and I continue to be amazed about the sophistication of criminals. When I was a cop, of course, we didn't believe that any criminals were sophisticated. I now realize, particularly having represented a number of them, that they're way more sophisticated than I ever gave them credit for. I'm delighted to help, and I applaud you for your effort to bring about social awareness and self-reliance in a meaningful way again.
Not a problem. Thanks for coming on. We were just talking a little bit about your book, Arrest Proof Yourself. And, of course, there's many things that you've done in your history and in your past that we're very interested in learning about. But I think before we get anywhere, I just want to ask you, because I'm sure people are going to be really curious about this question, but with the book, like Arrest Proof Yourself, it sounds like you're giving out a recipe on how to do anything wrong and get away with it. Is that what this book is really all about?
Well, and not at all. In fact, arrest proof derives from the term drown proof. And back in the 70s when I was a cop in Miami, we taught drown proofing your children. You all may even remember this. In fact, you all may have been drown proofed. I don't know. But it was where you would teach a child how to basically survive, not by swimming, but by floating, by going down, taking a breath, going down underwater and coming back up so that they could float, essentially. And Arrest Proof Yourself is that design, really. It's to give children an ability to deal with an encounter with law enforcement with a positive outcome instead of a negative outcome. So it's not about how to beat the system. It's about how to use manners, really, to control your destiny. And I think that's something, I have certainly seen this myself, I think it's something that's been forgotten by many of us, just the common use of manners, which never really go out of vogue, no matter who you are or where you are. And really this is it's a personal issue with me. I arrested many, many people in Miami when I was a police officer down there, and literally hundreds upon hundreds. Many of those individuals really didn't need to be arrested, and I see that now being a defense attorney, and that was done so that I could be promoted, and that's part of the key to understanding law enforcement. Law enforcement does a lot to promote the idea that they are public servants, that they're here to protect you and to serve. And while that is true in some regards, it's certainly not true in others. Police officers are promoted internally, and you won't hear anybody talk about this. They are promoted internally from the status of being a street officer to the coveted position of being a detective based on one factor alone, and that is the sheer number of arrests that you make. If I arrest three individuals, and you're a police officer who arrests 15, clearly you're the better cop. And better cops become detectives. And if you watch Hollywood at all, you know that there are very few movies about street officers. There are movies about detectives.
That's true.
And so this was a way of explaining my philosophy and views about policing to a new generation of young men who think that it can be macho in front of a police officer and not sustain any real liability. And, of course, that's not true. But if you understand that a police officer is there and acts as a portal into what I call the electronic plantation, you'll understand that even your presence with him is a danger to you. And the electronic plantation is basically a term that I've put together that means that if your fingerprints are ever taken by a law enforcement officer, you are in their record system permanently forever, and you're never going to get out of there. So if you look for a job years from now and you've been arrested for petty theft, that obviously is going to have an impact on that job. Subtle, perhaps, but an impact nevertheless. And once you've sustained one arrest, you're subject to sustain more arrests. And because when an officer looks at your record when making a determination as to whether or not he puts you in jail, he has access to that record system. And if he sees that you have prior arrests, not necessarily convictions, okay, then he's more likely or she's more likely to put you in jail. The funny thing about all of this is that what if you were arrested on totally trumped-up charges? Let's say you have an ex-girlfriend, and your ex-girlfriend calls the police and says that you attempted to kill her or sexually assault her. And the police come out and they arrest you. Now, later we find out that it's entirely untrue. okay, that the allegations of attempted murder or cap sex battery, as we call it in the trade, are just entirely fraudulent. But the police officer believed her. The police officer came out and arrested you. You're now in the system. Now the question arises, okay, she lied. So her fault, her charge, her criminal charge is a misdemeanor for filing a false police report. Yours, of course, is a life felony, all right? Now, in the police record checking for a traffic stop 2 years from now, they're going to punch in your tag. It's going to pull up your name. It's going to run your name automatically, and it's going to come back. And what is it going to say you were previously charged with?
You were charged with, like, sexual battery.
Right. So the first thing you're going to know this happened when you get what's known as a felony stop. And the officer says, let me see your hands, and I'm going to tell you how I want you to get out of the car over the PA system, okay? And his partner, you can see him through your rearview mirror getting out of the passenger side of the patrol unit with a shotgun. That's how you're going to know that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And that problem, let me tell you, is never going to go away. And you'll remember from civics class in high school that there are two sovereigns at work here, the state of Florida, where I am, and the federal government. Now, the state would arrest you for these charges, but as soon as they take your fingerprints and submit them to the FBI in West Virginia, they're going to be in the NCI system, okay? That NCI system is known as the National Criminal Information Center. That information is going to be stored in there permanently. Now, even though the state later dropped the charges against you because you hired a really good attorney, and that information is going to stay in NCIC forever. So even though it's fraudulent, in fact, fictitious, it's going to affect you for the rest of your life. So the book was an effort to educate young folks about how to behave in front of law enforcement officers in a manner calculated to not let them become a statistic.
You know, Dale, what really compelled me and explained this whole concept to me was when I read that example that you gave with the mother with the child, which has got some attention problems perhaps, and he's on some controlled substance, right, and a few pills might have dropped into the car somehow, and then she gets pulled over. And that's when I really realized how your book comes into play and why it is important. Not necessarily as means of getting away with something bad that you've done, but just how to behave and how to understand the law enforcement officer in front of you and get your chances higher of getting clean out of the situation.
Right, because once you've been tagged, you're never going to be untagged. And that's the problem. And as relates to that woman, we see this occasionally. You get stopped, you're driving in your car, you have a child that is on a medication. One of those pills happens to be a controlled substance, and the pill drops out because you put it in his lunch pail so he can take it at noontime when he's supposed to take it. Or, and we see this frequently in the inner city, not everybody owns a car. So a car becomes a valuable commodity, and occasionally they're lent out among friends. So if you've had the car lent out, you don't know what's in the car when it comes back to you, but because you've lent it out to a generally responsible person, you don't expect there to be anything bad in the car. But I will assure you that not only is this true with drugs, controlled substances, both legal and illegal, it's also true with bullets, okay? We handle cases where a car is lent out, it comes back, a guy's driving it, he happens to be a convicted felon, he gets stopped by the police, and they find one bullet in the car. Okay, we're talking about a cartridge that's capable of firing out of a gun, okay? Mm-hmm. And that cartridge in Florida is a minimum mandatory for a convicted felon, 3 years in custody.
Wow.
Okay, so you don't pass go. It's a strict liability offense almost.
So no weapon to fire it with, just the bullet itself?
Just the bullet itself.
Wow.
So what is your advice there? What is your general advice? What is the main idea that you basically try to drive home in your book when it comes to dealing with law enforcement?
Simply understand that if you don't behave, you're subject to be arrested. You've got to behave. It's a yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and being straightforward and honest with the police to the extent that you can be without obviously saying, I just robbed a place. I mean,
you know, what's interesting to me, when I was reading through your book and what really attracted me to it is, as social engineers, you know, our job as professional social engineers, so not malicious, but our job is to help companies by auditing their people. So we'll perform a similar attack that a malicious social engineer would on employees, but of course with different goal sets. Our goal is then after if it's successful, we use the results to educate them. Well, here's how it worked and why it worked, and here's how you cannot fall for it again.
All right.
If we fail miserably at a social engineering audit, the worst thing that happens to us is, you know, we have a little egg on our face. We might be a little embarrassed as professionals that didn't succeed or something to that effect. But there's no real results, you know, that are going to, harm us for the rest of our existence.
No real consequences.
Yeah, no consequence. That's a good, thank you. That's the word I was struggling for. But in this situations, the ones that you're painting, this is like extreme social engineering. If the person at the other end of the conversation with the police does not have the right body language, facial expression, magic words as you put them in the book, if they don't have these things, then the results can be what you just stated, you know, jail time, 3 years jail time for having a bullet in the car, or being a felon now because your son needs Ritalin for having ADD and it's found on the bottom of your car. You know, I mean, whatever. The results now are very extreme for not being successful at this social engineering gig, if I can even use that phrase.
You know, I think that's well put. But one point I'd like to make is that, of course, law enforcement are the supreme social engineers. Let there be no question. If you are out in public behaving in an unsocial way, they will correct that. And they correct that by arresting your ass and putting you in jail forever if necessary. So, you know, I was out flounder gigging last night. And flounder gigging is an activity where you take a boat and you take it on the flats and out near the ocean and you put lights on it and you take a gig and you gig fish when you see them. And I was thinking, you know, I have to have a fishing license to be social in that context. I got to have a boat registration. I have to have a trailer registration. I have to have all of these things in order to be social and not subject to being tagged for being unsocial. So a lot of times law enforcement will arrest you simply because you failed to comply administratively. And all of that is a form of, clearly in my mind, social engineering.
Well, would you say there's other factors, too, that can equate to you getting arrested? Like, for example, for me, I was in the United States military, the Marine Corps, and I always get out of speeding tickets. And, I mean, there are certain preconceived things that you would see as a person, like, you know, being part of the armed services or, you know, have their kids in the car or things like that that would, you know, not cause you to get arrested or as you put it, put your ass in jail.
There's a little question that who you are, or at least who you appear to be, controls most of your life.
Right. So
that's certainly true in the context of speeding tickets. I enjoy that same immunity from prosecution in that regard that you as a former Marine do. Or I'm sorry, you're never a former Marine.
No, never a former Marine.
You know, that's true. People treat you differently, but you know precisely how to deal with authority, don't you?
Absolutely. It's always yes or no, sir.
And you can tell us exactly what that is. It's yes, sir, no, sir. You're in charge. I'll do whatever you say, sir. And once you...
But there's more to this. There's more to this, Bill, because obviously behavior is critical, but from what I saw in the book, you actually go ahead and you talk about some magic sentences and magic words that you can say that can further help you get to your goal. So it's more than just behavior, I think. I think there's also some perhaps deeper elements of behavior that we can investigate here.
I think you're right. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Frankly, the first thing that you the first connection you ever have with somebody else in the normal standard social context is you see them, right? But that's no longer true in the world that you all populate. The first thing you do is you see their texting, maybe, and maybe you hear their voice. I'm not so sure. But we tell a lot from a voice, and we certainly tell a lot from texting. I know I am a horrible speller, okay? And if I sent from the law firm letters out with my spelling on them, they'd think I'm an idiot. And they may have a point, but it's that appearance of being part of the positive elements in our society and not part of the negative. I represent clients frequently who simply cannot properly speak the English language without employing get-ease. And that get-ease is what will get you in trouble, okay? That's a pun off of the word ghetto and get.
Now,
and so once an officer hears that language, their antenna immediately go up.
Mm.
And so, but I think you're right. If you learn manners and behaving properly in front of authoritarian figures, your life will be a whole lot smoother than it ever otherwise could be.
Like in the book on page 177, you have a chapter that says use words that are magic.
Right.
And in the first paragraph or the first subheading, you start with a paragraph that paints a scene. You know, a cop approaches you, stops you for whatever reason. He thinks you're up to something no good. And your phrase that you say is magic is, "Officer, have I done something wrong?" Why is that a magic? Like, what is it about that sentence that makes it magic?
Well, it does two things, okay? It shows the officer. Now, remember, in combination with this, there's a physical presence there, all right? So you're not doing this over the Internet or over a phone line.
Right.
Okay? But I will tell you, and you may already know this, when I'm talking to judges on the phone, which I often do you know what I do here in my office? I stand up, and I speak to them from a standing position,
mm-hmm.
all right? Because that helps orient my mind to who I'm speaking to, all right? And the same thing is true when you deal with police officers on the street. You got to stand up straight. You can't slouch. You can't fidget. You got to look him square in the eyes, and not in an aggressive way. And then you say those words. You're acknowledging that person is the officer, right?
Right.
You are in charge, okay? Have I done something wrong? Then the expectation is that you are waiting for the officer to tell you what, if anything's going wrong. That puts the officer on alert that you're also not an idiot. You know, and
yeah.
Think of the common responses that an individual stopped by the police would have when confronted by an officer. And they are, what do you think they might say to the officer? What's the matter with you? I haven't done anything wrong. You know, you can think of that whole plethora of responses that are going to potentiate the officer toward a negative outcome for you, meaning an arrest. So behavior is crucial here, but it comes in combination with the way you appear to the officer. For example, it's not going to do you much good if you're dressed entirely in black, right, and you have karate shoes on or stealth shoes on. I mean, the officer, your pleasantries to him are not going to make any difference. So they've got to be done in combination.
So the sentence that the words themselves are magic because they're polite and they show your submissiveness, but it also is mixed, like what you're saying, with your facial expressions and your body language, which need to be confident but not arrogant.
Right, and they need to be in context, right? Everything we do is contextual, and certainly that is certainly and really very true in law enforcement. For example,
now, one of the things that always freaks me out when meeting law enforcement is that I get stressed even if I've done nothing. You know, the whole, especially if you're in a foreign country, this is even more true. You know, you've done nothing wrong, but the guy in front of you sees that you're not quiet. Perhaps you are a bit fidgety without you actually doing anything. And at times I actually think that because even though I'm not guilty of anything, just my stress level might make me look that way. How does one deal with, not getting too excited and not getting too agitated by the situation?
I think that's true for everyone. If you are focusing on the problem at hand, you can get stressed out. I mean, there are very human functions that cause that to be the case, right? You get an adrenaline drop, your heart rate goes up, your pupils dilate, the skin tightens up, the blood starts supplying itself predominantly to the major muscle groups and to your heart, and so that if you're cut, you won't bleed as much as you might otherwise. All of those things are biologic. And the way to control them, frankly, is to, A, don't do something wrong that's going to subject you to that scrutiny. And the second thing is to let your mind focus on something other than why you're actually standing there. Because if you focus on the fact that there's someone who's going to inspect you or ask you questions, then you're going to heighten your awareness, your body's awareness of that. And frankly, what I try to do in circumstances like that seems almost Zen Buddhist, and it's just to think about pleasant thoughts not related to the circumstances I'm in right now. I mean, everybody's familiar with the idea that if you're going to take a polygraph exam, you put a tack in your shoe, and when they ask the important questions, you step on that tack so it causes you a lot of pain, and they get a false reading that way, and it's somewhat similar.
Does that actually work?
Yeah.
Actually, it does work, but the Bureau, the FBI polygraph exams are about 4 hours in length, so by the time that all happens, you're done anyway.
Yeah.
And by the way, most people confess anyway under polygraphic scrutiny. You will find that most people will just tell the truth because they're scared to death of the device.
I mean, your advice to Maddie sounds almost like there's a certain field of study called neuro-linguistic programming that is basically like talking to yourself and convincing yourself of certain things. People use it for self-help. That certain words hold power in making changes. It almost sounds like that's what you're suggesting, is that if we are stopped and we're not guilty of a crime, but like Maddie, I'm like him. I've had a lot of fear when I get pulled over, even if it's just for a traffic stop, like things are going to go awfully wrong. And that stress probably shows up on my face. I'm not as fortunate as Dave or you. When I get pulled over, I can get pulled over for like almost nothing, and I end up getting like every ticket under the sun. It's like it doesn't make sense to me, but
Well, I think a lot of
I'll send you a free copy of the book so you can reread it, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to need it. I'm going to put it on my dashboard. Maybe that will help me.
But remember this. Law enforcement, the reason for car stops is to conduct an attitude check of the driver and anyone else that's in the car, and also for things such as the smell of marijuana. I mean, that's probable cause for a search of the car and arrests and all those sorts of things. And you'd be surprised, absolutely surprised, at least I always was, the number of people who ride around in an automobile smoking a joint. And that is just insanity from my perspective. Yeah. When I was in Miami, just the possession of what we would call a roach today, a small unburnt portion of marijuana, was a felony. So that's often why I led the district in arrests, is because I also led the district in car stops.
Yeah,
and there's a direct correlation between the number of stops you make and the number of arrests you make.
Actually, Dale, I got a question about that.
Well, that always sort of upset me that would be used as an excuse, if you will, by law enforcement to make an arrest.
The whole aspect of the car stops is interesting to me because back when I was first driving, is actually the first week that I had a driver's license. I was driving home. It was in the evening, probably around 8 o'clock at night. It was dark out. I got into the fast lane to go past somebody that was going a little bit under the speed limit. I was kind of a heavy foot, so I used the cruise control to keep it at the speed limit quite a lot. and which is what I was doing. Someone came up behind me, started riding my butt really quick, so I sped up so I could get back over and let them by. When I sped up to let them to get out of their way, after a minute, then the flashers come on. I get pulled over. It turns out it was State Patrol, and they pulled me over. They come over. They explained to me that I was speeding, and I tried to explain back that, somebody, it turned out to be you, was on my butt, and I was going to try to let them by. And they explained to me there's no reason for speeding, that sort of thing. Now, remember, I'm young. I'm first week of having a driver's license. And so while they're talking to me, the car I'm in is one that I had just purchased about just shortly before that, and I quite honestly hadn't cleaned it out very well, and the previous owner was a smoker. While they're talking to me, they asked me if they can search the car. I explained, I say, no, you can't. I didn't have anything in the car, but I had watched enough of the cop shows to know that you might as well say no. At that point, they told me that since they could see ashes in the car, that was probable cause enough for them to search it. They pulled me out, handcuffed me, put me at the front of the car, went through the car. They didn't find anything. There's nothing there. And then they let me go and put me on my way. But as a young person with a brand new driver's license, that being the first encounter I had with law enforcement as an adult, that to a certain extent colors your point of view towards law enforcement going forward. How do you deal with those sorts of situations when you have, number one, those sorts of pretexts for doing the searches? How do you counsel your clients on how to deal with those sorts of situations?
My counsel to my clients basically is don't ever permit law enforcement to obtain more evidence from you based on your voice or your agreement to certain conduct, all right? And that takes for example, in a DUI case, typically people do field sobriety tests. I don't recommend that my clients do field sobriety tests. And that's where it starts. And you will never find an officer, or if you do, it would certainly be rare, who would say to you, you don't have to take the field sobriety test. You can refuse to do that.
But if you do, you get arrested right away, don't you?
Well, you're going to get arrested either way.
Okay.
It's an illusion. I say in the book, and this is certainly true, this is that if they had enough information to arrest you, they would not be talking to you. Your mouth is never going to prevent them from arresting you. Now, there are extreme examples where that would be untrue, that what you say could prevent them from arresting you, but that's rare. And the bulk of my clients are in a circumstance where they've been weaving down the road, or the car smells like dope, or when you try to tell a police officer they cannot search your car. The book goes into very specifically what you ought to do and how you ought to manage that. But it starts with the complaint that, officer, I've done everything you wanted me to do here, and I'm really late. I've got to be at wherever you've got to be, and you have to tell the truth about that. Because as an officer, I have seen officers pick up a phone or get on the radio and have the units call to see whether or not the guy did have a doctor's appointment someplace in 15 minutes. So you don't want to find yourself lying to the police officer, but certainly I've complied with everything you've requested. I have to go now because I've got to pick up my mother, or whatever where you were heading. Obviously, you're in a car. You're headed someplace where you're expected, and I've got to go there, and with your permission, I'd like to leave now. You don't ever have to formally address the issue of whether or not a search should be permitted. And certainly, I would never advise anybody to verbally authorize a search. The law has oddly changed here in Florida that makes it clear that officers can't just search because they want to search. Now, the problem is that if you are so young and inexperienced that you're going to submit to the search with the view that, you know what, I'm not doing anything wrong, I don't care whether they search or not. You know, that to me is so un-American, just utterly un-American. America was founded on the idea that government is too powerful and it has too many rights to do whatever it wishes to do. And somehow, I'm sorry?
Here's where I kind of agree and disagree on that. I'm in the exact same stance as you. America was founded from a perspective of less government. However, for me, it doesn't bother me if a police officer pulls me over and says, "Hey, I want to search your car," if I know I'm not doing anything wrong.
You're in America. You don't have to submit to behavior like that. And as an American, I don't expect you to. That is, when I was growing up as a kid, we watched a movie called Combat. Vic Morrow was in it, and it was about a bunch of guys assigned to France, where my father fought in World War II. And one of the things that the villain in each of these shows was a little pedocrat, and he was a Nazi, okay? And he would walk up to people arbitrarily in France and say, "Your papers, please." And that just scared us to death. That's what our fathers fought against in part, and that's the very same thing. When an officer stops you and says, "I want to search your car."
I think it's more than that, Dave, because, again, in the book, I can definitely see myself driving one day, getting stopped by a police officer, asking to search my car. And again, I've got nothing bad in my car, so I don't mind it being searched. But then if you're unfortunate enough to have, some medication which might need registration, and you don't have your paperwork on site, then you might be in trouble, even if you have done nothing wrong or you think you've done nothing wrong. So
sure.
On one hand, I can understand that, but on the other hand, I think I have a problem with telling law enforcement, refusing something to law enforcement, perhaps because I'm not American, but it just seems very confrontational. Can I search your car? No,
Dale,
you may not.
Dale, you must love the law that they passed. What was it, down in Utah now, where especially with people who are not Americans, those who have immigrated to the country, where now a police officer can just ask for their INS papers or their immigration papers at will? Arizona, right. So now they can just walk up to anyone on the street and say, "Show me your legit immigration papers," or you get sent back to ICE.
You actually got to have probable cause to stop you to begin with. Okay? And let's just put it in a different context, not related to immigration. Let's say there's a federal law that says you can't have a short-barreled rifle, okay? And it's the ATF that enforces that law for a short-barreled rifle, a sawed-off shotgun, okay? The officer stops you, and in plain view on the back seat of your car is a sawed-off shotgun, okay? That's a federal offense. It's not a state offense. It's a federal offense, all right? Should the officer arrest you for a sawed-off shotgun?
Oof.
Well, the answer is yes.
Why you carrying
And that's enforcing a federal law. And my reading of the Arizona statute is that you can't just walk up to somebody standing, minding your own business on the street, which that'd be horrible, okay, and say there's got to be some other law enforcement activity that provides the opportunity for law enforcement to interface with that individual. And keep in mind, they do this all the time anyway. You're just simply not aware of it. If they run your name in NCIC, which clearly they do, every time they stop somebody, that's with electronics the way it is today. When I had to stop somebody in Miami, I had to go to a different radio channel, give that different radio operator a name and a date of birth, and that radio operator then ran the information and then called me back. Sometimes take 45 minutes. Well, now it's instantaneous.
Right.
So the officers know more about you. And here's another point. Right now in Jacksonville and in other cities, there are police units that ride around with cameras on the front and back of the car, and they run tags against stolen cars or cars whose owners no longer have a valid driver license, and they are just routinely arrest them based on a tag number that's being run electronically while the officer has no direct interface with it at all.
Wow. So let me twist this around and ask you a question, because you were law enforcement. So how did you, as a law, especially someone who was an expert in interrogation and interview tactics with the FBI, you had to deal with some pretty nasty people because of your sex crimes experience. How did you go and read people?
Well, there are really interesting techniques, and they're called microbursts, and you may be familiar with that technology. but it has to do with the face has a certain number of muscles, okay, and only about 15 or 20% of them are actually controlled by us directly. In other words, when you smile or you wink, those muscles you have control over, but the muscles that are used in microbursts, you don't have any control over. And the effort, and not to go into too much detail, but the effort is simply to challenge someone that you're in a conversation with, put them in a position where they're going to lie about a question that you've asked them. Once they've lied, you observe them when they make the lie to you, and then if that very behavior repeats itself during the course of the more salient aspects of the interview, you know they're lying to you. And I just had this happen this morning, in fact. I was with another lawyer who works for the firm, and I asked him about someone else he used to work with, and he lied to me. He said, the guy's a really good guy, all right? And I knew from my own history that they didn't like one another at all. And after he said it, his face did a funny thing, okay? He shifted his eyes down and to the left. He had some funny wrinkles around the corners of his eyes, and he moved physically. Now, if I see that repeated behavior in him, I'll know that he's lying to me. But you've got to be aware of it.
Would you say?
Say that again?
How reliable would you say that this type of technique is when you're interrogating, a specific
no more or less reliable than a polygraph exam, because a polygraph exam simply judges stress.
I mean, this is the same science like Dr. Paul Ekman. He calls them micro expressions.
I couldn't tell you.
Okay, yeah. So
I have not read him.
Not a problem. It's very similar to what you're saying. I mean, his theory on micro expressions, and he did studies where he actually went to indigenous people that have no communications with the outside world via television or radio or media, and studied facial expressions, and then compared those muscular movements to those like in America where there are much media interpretation, and found that, like what you just said, muscular movements in the face based on emotional responses to questions are standard for all humans.
Well, I think that's, and we've all got moms, right?
Right.
Well, you tried to put a lie over on your mother, and she gave you that look.
That's right.
She didn't believe you.
So you're one of your big interrogation tactics then was using what you called microbursts or micro expressions, and being able to read someone's facial language, I guess you can say, to see if they were telling you the truth or lying to you.
Well, I wish I could say, yeah, that's true. But, the simplest way to get the truth out of somebody, do you know what that is? Is for them to like you.
Uh-huh.
So gaining trust.
We don't lie to people we like. And of course, there are little white lies. I'm not talking about that stuff. And in an interview interrogation setting with a suspect in connection with a serious offense, there's a sort of a camaraderie, if you will, between the investigator and the offender. And if you are considerate and use manners, you're more likely to elicit the truth from the individual than you are under other circumstances. I mean, I've seen people beaten with a phone book before. That doesn't work. And what does work is if you're straightforward with somebody and somebody wants to be truthful with you.
So becoming their friend.
All right. That's right.
Becoming their friend was like the best tactic you had.
It was.
That is phenomenal. That is, I would agree that even in the non-law enforcement world, in social engineering, and our practices, that also works. The more people like you, the better they will react to you. I mean, if you walk up to, like if your job is to try to see how the secretary will give out too much information, and you walk up to her and you start demanding things, and your facial expression is rough and anxious and nervous, definitely going to get nowhere. But if you walk up and you're nice to her and polite and kind, and people like you, they feel generally drawn to you, then it's very easy for people to open up and talk to you.
I think that's one of the reasons we're so successful as a law firm. The truth is that I find most attorneys to be jerks. And
you said it, not me.
Yeah.
We don't behave that way at all. In fact, we're omni-aware that is the perception of most people. And so if you go a little way just the opposite, you tend to be hugely more successful than a lot of our competitors. Just because we are kind people, we will talk to you, we're not abusive, we're not self-important as relates to matters of the law. We just don't behave that way, and I don't do that in my personal life either.
I think what you're mentioning here, and what's pretty clear through your book, Arrest Proof, yourself, is, I mean, you can really change the way you act and are perceived with people to get desirable results. I mean, not only from police officers, but to your customers and your clients and to other people that you're interacting with on a daily basis. If you actually, on your book, if you look at, I think it's on page 90, it's changing clueless behaviors. You have a diagram on different things you can do on a daily basis to really try to change your behavior.
Right. And I think that's really very true. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. I say this, in a sense it's true, in a sense it's not true. But it doesn't take a lot to take a bath, to comb your hair, to brush your teeth, and to try to act respectful. It doesn't take a computer science degree somewhere. Just to be a kind, thoughtful human being is probably the most important thing you can do in life.
Correct.
And, I mean, we all are aware of people who enter our lives who are just absolute jerks. That when you get through with them, they're emotional black holes. You get near them, and they just suck the life right out of you. And so when you get off the phone or out of a room with them, you're just going, oh, man, that was a killer. Those are the kind of people to not be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dale, I have a question. Personal curiosity, perhaps. Obviously, you with your experience, you have the ability to notice these facial expressions and know when people are lying to you. Generally, would you say that the law enforcement that we would meet, on the road and in the streets, do they have this type of training, or is this something that they gain with experience? Is it something that they're taught? Is it something that they're actively seeking when they're talking to you? Is this just a matter of experience as the years go on, you learn who is lying and who is not?
I think it's the latter of those two. I think that initially you're sort of on autopilot. You get out of the police academy. You've had a couple of riding assignments with a guy who is a fairly sophisticated police officer. They're called training advisors. And that guy's been around, and you emulate his behavior, but that at that point is just emulation. You're following his example. And I think over time you become more sophisticated in your analysis of circumstances and events and how a person presents, whether you can believe them or not.
I see.
And I think and that's true about all aspects of life, not just encounters with law enforcement. I tend to remain boy-like in regard to people. One of my mother's favorite sayings is, the best thing about me is I have a real short memory. So if people did her wrong, she just forgot about it because it didn't make any difference, and she went on about her life. And I think that in combination with simply not only not recalling, but being boy-like, curious, and just happy and not take things too seriously. Those are features which, if used by anyone, really benefit you. For example, if you've had a real run-in with, let's say, someone of a different race, and you let that run-in harbor in you, and a police officer of that same race encounters you, you're going to harbor some hostility if you haven't shed yourself of that. So carrying grudges and not forgetting what people have done to you is its own worst problem, I think.
That's real interesting, Dale. And I don't want to change the topic, but I had a question listed here. I just wanted to ask you because I know we're getting near the time that I told you I would hold you. I don't want to keep you all day, but the one part of your book under the chapter of magic words, you talk about people who get caught and they are doing something wrong. Okay, so the reason I want to apply this, especially to social engineering, is because this can happen to us. I mean, if we're paid by a company to come and audit them, and part of that might be physical security, where they want to test their alarm systems or their security staff if people can infiltrate their perimeter, and you get caught. You get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. I mean, in your book, you have an example of someone who's casing a place for a burglary, and there this guy gets caught. Then the magic phrase you say is because I'm afraid of the police.
Right. Well, it's a reason, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a lie, right? Criteria for your initial encounter. And I think really that was written in context with a kid, and you all won't have the benefit of this. When we were kids, we used to throw dirt balls at cars and things like that today would end up with felony prosecution, right? So really, in that context, if a police officer finds you hiding under a bush, you better have something to say. And if you don't have anything to say, that'll be used against you. And certainly it's true that you're hiding because you were scared. Mm-hmm. The follow-up question from the police officer is, why are you scared? Mm-hmm. And you have to be prepared to answer that, and that's going to require a little more soul-searching. But obviously that's an effort to at least deal with many people who do encounter police officers and who will hide from them. I mean, I find it in my practice in fleeing cases all the time. My client's done absolutely nothing wrong, but he sees a police officer, the police officer looks at him, he flees, he hides under a bush, the police officer stops him, and instead of shooting him, asks him what on earth he's doing. Then that's the icebreaker, if you will. But, of course, none of these phrases, and this is true in human existence, are the end-all of every expression you would say. And they're not designed to eliminate any culpability for illegal conduct on your part. They're just a way to begin the process of talking to the police officer in a respectful manner so that the police officer doesn't simply put you in jail because you're not behaving. And I see that often. I see that very often in my practice where police officers will arrest people because they act out. They get an attitude, and then they just get arrested. And although the state attorney's office may ultimately not prosecute the case, I'm dealing with a client who's got an arrest history vis-a-vis what we talked about early on.
Very, very interesting, Dale. I really appreciate your time with us today. There is a lot. There's a lot in your book that we can learn about, really. And I think that I like your last statement that you said. I mean, there is no one thing that will work. No one phrase you say and it's like a get out of jail free card. But it's an attitude. It's an action. It involves everything: your language, your body language, your facial expressions, your attitude towards other people. All of that really is affects how you can use this information.
Well, and I don't think that young folks are taught that anymore.
I agree with that.
There's a lack of general self-reliance in the community. We rely on the police for way too much. And in my own personal experience, they often get called in matters that really are not of a police nature, but they ultimately do become a police matter for the reasons that we've discussed. But I wanted to suggest another thought to you all as well. One of the things that concerns me is that there's no neighborhood anymore. Now, when I grew up, a neighborhood involved houses and people on porches and walking and bicycles. Your neighborhoods are entirely something different now, and that's really where you all can become invaluable to an employer or a company, because the new neighborhoods are all ethereal and electronic, and they don't have the same earmarks, if you will, that they did when I was a kid and had a neighborhood. You knew that the wealthiest guy lived in the biggest house. You don't know those things now on the Internet. There's no way for you, really, to know those things. And so your challenge, really, is to identify manners in which you can verify the reality that someone projects onto an electronic screen somewhere, often hundreds of thousands of miles from where you actually are, perhaps. Or not that far. Well,
no, but that's still a good point. I mean, we're definitely disconnected many times from actual people because of the internet. Like you said, we're definitely disconnected, and I think that does affect how, not just in this field, but I mean just in general, how people deal with each other. How people deal with one another, just human interaction, because everything is text messaging or IMing or other things which don't require a lot of emotional input to really accomplish those things.
And
yeah,
of
it's
course,
interesting.
I think one of the most exciting parts of being a human is the emotional aspects of it.
Yes.
So to the extent that we are letting that shift away from us, that's kind of sad.
Well, Dale, I truly appreciate it. What I want to ask is if someone wanted to get more information on you or your book, can they do that at your website?
Absolutely, and we would be delighted to talk to them, and certainly anyone who shows up with a security-related issue concerning their businesses, I will certainly turn them over to you all.
Oh, thank you.
And it's been a privilege to speak to you all. I admire you for what you're doing, and I wish you the best of fortune.
Thank you. And I want to say,
Thank you very much.
It's DaleCarsonLaw.com, right?
That's it, DaleCarsonLaw.com.
Thank you very much for your time today.
The pleasure's all on our end. Yep.
Truly appreciate it, and I look forward to maybe speaking to you again in the future.
Anytime. I'd love to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Y'all have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Well, that was a great podcast, huh, guys?
Yes,
yeah, great.
I think Dale had a lot of interesting information. It's we haven't had too many guys that have been around for that long. I mean, he's talking about being a law enforcement in the 70s, which is probably when most of us were born. So he's got some experience, of trying to read people through the ages in areas that probably many of us aren't at all experienced in. So I found that to be quite interesting on my part. I thought some of the things he brought out about the whole person, I really liked when he started talking about micro-expressions, but I liked the statement at the end where he was saying that it's not a one sentence does all kind of mentality. I kind of feel that same way with social engineering, that it's not, there's one phrase that's so magical that if you use it, you can get out of any sticky spot in a social engineering audit at all. I think it's more like what he said, it's a whole package. It has to be your body language, your voice, your attitude, everything.
I mean, looking at it from an NLP perspective, law enforcement have been using it for years. Micro-expressions are pretty much the same exact thing in a lot of aspects. So, the law enforcement, side of the house is pretty much the same type of tactic that we are, from a social engineering perspective in order to influence people or read people or try to gauge what they're doing. And it doesn't have to do with that magic word, as you said. It's more so around how you're behaving, your mannerisms, being truthful and honest, or trying to do that con where you are trying to act as if you're truthful and gain that person's trust in order to exploit their weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. I think that is probably encompasses a lot of what he was saying.
What I find interesting about this is the whole aspect of where the incentives are when you're dealing with people and knowing how to work them properly. Like I can think of a personal example, and when I'm doing audits for some companies, sometimes I come across something and I just wish I didn't see it because it's such a stupid little problem on their part. But I know that because I found it, I'm going to have to document it. So that's extra documentation, that's extra lines, and it's just more work for me for something small and silly. I got to imagine in the law enforcement aspect, there's a lot of that same sort of aspect going on. So that then can you put yourself in a situation when you're dealing with law enforcement or perhaps in other sorts of social engineering situations where it just becomes more trouble to deal with you than it's worth? And so you get kind of shooed to the side and get overlooked from that perspective.
I'm not sure if that would work, but you can try it and let us know.
Well, what I'm thinking, you're dealing with, you get pulled over, and how many times do you get, the ticket versus told to slow down? How many times do you have a blinker out and you're told hey?
Well,
buddy,
if you're Relic, it sounds like you get that every time. If you're me, I get beat down with billy clubs for not turning my blinker on.
It's your eye patch, Chris.
My
you look like a pirate.
I gotta stop wearing that, I guess. I thought the magic phrase when you get pulled over was, "What did I do, matey?" But I guess not.
Where's the booty?
Yeah. Oh, yes, only you, Elwood. Only you.
Where's the booty?
Yeah. Yeah, that will get me out of getting a ticket. I'm going to try that next time. Good stuff.
Going into this, though, I mean, I think he definitely put a good perception on how law enforcement, really profile people and interact with somebody based off of how they interact with the police officer. So, I mean, we should probably take a lot of what he said and try to add that to our persona of how we interact with law enforcement so that we don't get, as he put it, our asses in jail. So.
Yeah, I think the big thing that we can take away from all of that with him is making people like you. That was like the key. Liking is one of the strongest aspects of influence that is available out there.
Chris, I like you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, of course, I don't like you, but But I think that is a pretty interesting aspect to consider when social engineering, because I read a quote that it's not so much making people like you is not so much about an external stimuli, but it's more about you liking them first. People are drawn to people who are drawn to them. So maybe a Zen social engineering learning lesson for the day. What do we got on the end here? I got a few things to mention before we do close up, but I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Dave. We got a ton of stuff going on at Black Hat and DEF CON besides the CTF. I think there's a huge release of something about to occur. Do you want to tease the listeners with anything?
Oh, I guess. No, there's a lot getting released. There's the Social Engineer Toolkit version 0.6, which I have to say is probably the best release that we've ever done. There's been a lot of work going into it, and luckily I got the majority of the programming done before my twins were born, so that's always a plus. But in version 0.6, I mean, it incorporates a whole bunch of new attack vectors, including tab nabbing, which, I'm not sure from a practicality perspective if you'd really use it, but it incorporates with the credential harvester as well, so you can use it in a multiple amount of attacks. Mm-hmm. But so that's going to be a nice new one. And then, I don't know if you saw the man left in the middle attack by Kyle Osborne. He came out with a way of using HTTP referrers. If you find like cross-site scripting within a website, it uses the HTTP referrers to hijack the rest of the credentials on the legitimate site through cross-site scripting. So I incorporated that attack vector into it. It's got a ton of bug fixes. I think there's over like 45 that I've done so far.
Wow.
I guess that means I should probably write better code, huh?
Yeah,
and, you really write buggy software. Jeez.
If you want a good example of unbelievable code writing, you should take a look at Mutz's most recent exploit on exploitdb.com. The code
that one down.
Oh no, the code writing on that is so extremely intense. I'm telling you, listeners, if you have not gone to exploit-db.com, you need to run there now and look at Mutz's most recent exploit. It will blow your mind.
Basically, what you're saying, I need to take some examples from his skilled programming.
Oh yeah, I mean the programming skill at that. 14236 is the exploit number. Go check it out. It's amazing.
Sounds good. Well, I mean, kind of. I don't know how I continue from that, but it's been great because what's taking off with SET that I never anticipated was the community is really adopting it, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from really good people that are in the field using it on a regular basis of what would actually help them. And so, Chris Nickerson and his team, from Layers Consulting have been pretty heavy into it.
He was talking about it, about using SET. So that's pretty cool to hear that it's actually not just getting played with in VMs, but it's getting used also in real life out in the field. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
what's our downloads at for that?
What's that?
What's our downloads at for that? Because I know the other day we were talking about how many downloads we have for a SET.
Yeah, we hit over 1 million.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Hit over 1 million downloads, which is nice and also scary at the same time.
Yeah.
But
can I stop the
great.
script now?
What's that?
So can I stop the script now?
Yeah. Yeah. How many shells do we have off of that? How much?
I've got this WGET script, which is just looping for the past few months. Maybe I should stop it.
I thought you meant the internal.
No, but I mean, it's been really good to see. I mean, Kevin Mitnick's been giving me some ideas on it, as well as a few others. So a lot of new different things in there that are going to be released. We're also releasing in that is the new Adreno attack vectors through the Tenzi devices, and those are for if you're doing a physical social engineer. Me and my coworker Josh have been working on it pretty heavily. Josh Kelly, and he's been doing a phenomenal amount of work on it. And basically, you're able to utilize a hardware-based device that emulates a keyboard and has on-base storage on it. So if you want to plug it into a system, completely bypass auto run, and we'll actually execute payloads and download backdoors into the system all through an emulated keyboard, which from a physical pen test perspective has a lot of implications. You can solder into a working keyboard. The keyboard will still function properly and still recognize as the exact same keyboard. And then you can have it randomly do things during periods of inactivity, or you can replace mouse device with the same thing, have it replicate that. So there's just a slew of handful of things that we'll be releasing at B-Sides that is just going to be pretty unbelievable. Are you
going to make Seth ever do the actual soldering for us?
I'm trying, but I don't have much of skillful programming experience that he released on the Exploit DB. So, I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm consulting with Mutz on how to do that, though.
Yeah, I just let it rip yesterday. I went full steam ahead, sent my single character, and did my stuff.
Oh, you did, man. I'm telling you, that is going to be our next course is going to be based off of that exploit.
But come on, isn't it ridiculous? You send a single character and the whole thing crashes.
Oh, it is ridiculous. But what's ridiculous is just funny seeing, you have some of the latest exploits known publicly to man on that page with your name attached to it, and then the most recent one is
a single character one.
Yeah, bracket. Crash. Really? I mean,
it's like ASLR and that bypass exploits, and then you have the single character crash.
Yeah, I bypass every AV on Earth, code caves, hiding things inside of other files, and bracket crash.
Well, they say that the best design is the simplest possible. So maybe you could argue
good for diversity.
The best exploit ever.
Yes. I love it.
So last but not least, Black Hat and DEF CON releasing a whole bunch of new stuff on PowerShell or bypassing execution restriction policies that Microsoft has put in place, and releasing a whole bunch of new Metasploit add-ons and modules and proof of concept code. Well, it's not really proof of concept when it actually does it and works. So definitely want to check out the Black Hat and DEF CON one as well.
Awesome. So that's a lot of good stuff. Is that before I get into the sponsors, because I got to do something special this month. Is there anything else we want to bring up before I do that?
Aside from Mutz's awesome exploit?
Yeah. Sorry, Mutz. Man, I tell you, it's gonna live.
If I knew, I would have just shut up.
Yeah. You should have known. I mean, you're with us, right? So this month we kind of got some special things going on because. Normally we mention some of the sponsors and what they do for us, but this month is a little more. Just to kind of mention, first of all, Spy Associates from spyassociates.com. They sent us a few really, really cool devices that you notice are not in this last month's newsletter because we're going to be bringing them to Vegas, and one of them will be actually giving away while in Vegas at DEF CON, maybe as part of the prize package for the winner of the CTF contest. So I'm not going to get too much into what those are, but you can check out Spy Associates, spyassociates.com, from our page there on the sponsors page. Of course,
really looking forward to the taser they sent, though.
That's yeah, we're going to actually test that out on you, right? Because you volunteered.
Me?
Yeah.
Whoa. So, we didn't talk about this.
Oh, was that when you volunteered Dan for that?
Yes.
Ming, stand here. We're going to tase you. I bet he would do it.
We need to test this taser. Come here, boy.
I bet he would do it. Dan, stand here. Take your shirt off. We're going to tase you with 12 million volts. Poor kid.
So we can tell all our listeners on the podcast. It's serving a good purpose. Come here.
Yes, come here. We're going to tase you, and then we want you to describe how it felt.
I hope you're not leaving this on.
Of course I am. Next.
Dan, we love you. We wouldn't tase you.
No, we wouldn't tase you, Dan. Well, we might, but we still love you.
We wouldn't tase you with you expecting it. It'd be.
Yeah. And, of course, Mutz is here and he hates when I do this, but we have to thank Offensive Security as a sponsor because more than normal with the podcast support and the servers and all that stuff is the support that we're getting from OffSec with the CTF out in Vegas, just with the help of setting up and the materials, everything. Just there's so much support that we really have to give a massive shout-out to OffSec. So we really, really appreciate it. Check out all of our courses at offsec.com.
And just to add on to that, I mean, totally incorporated into our organization, all the training that OffSec puts on, and is by far the best training ever made. And I'm not just saying that because Mutz is on the phone and he has that awesome exploit. It really is the truth. So,
and if you want an example, if you want an example of the awesomeness that you'll learn in any of our courses, check out Mutz's most recent exploit.
You like the music?
Sales have now dropped. OffSec is closing. Also, the EFF. The EFF, man, I tell you, these guys come through every month for us with something since we got hooked up with them. And this month with the CTF,
kind of a shame that we need them as much as we do.
It's not a shame. I mean, if the EFF wasn't around, we probably would be in a lot more trouble because the CTF, we definitely would. I mean, the CTF got so much publicity that we had to start really be concerned about, our flags, our targets, this and that, and the EFF help us to keep our nose above water.
Our jail time.
Yes. They helped our jail time to a minimum. And I really, really want to give a shout-out to them, EFF.org. They're just amazing people there that do all of this as volunteers to help out companies or organizations like ours that are trying to educate the public. So big, huge shout-out to the EFF for that. And we actually have well, besides OffSec, which is a fully paying sponsor, we have a paying sponsor this month, CWC, or Continuum Worldwide. Give them a shout-out.
How did they get suckered into this?
I'm sorry?
How did they get suckered into that?
It was your exploit, Mutz.
Yeah, we sent them your most elite exploit, and all of their bank accounts just started sending us money. Jim works with them, and he was talking about the contest, the CTF, and a couple guys at his work approached him about it because, of course, it got press. And we had quite a few companies that actually contacted us wanting to sponsor our event out with the CTF out in Vegas. Some big ones, too. And Continuum came through. They have sponsored our event, some of the materials that we need in order to run the CTF out in Vegas, and the banners, which you'll see will be beautifully printed out there for the CTF. We'll do more at Vegas when we talk about Continuum. But if you want to check them out as a sponsor, you can get a link to their site, CWC, on our sponsors page, or CONTIUUMWW.com. That's ContinuumWorldwide.com. And the last thing I do want to give a shout-out to is George Starcher. George is a guy who helps a lot of podcasts out. I guess he's kind of known in the podcast community. He helped out like Paul.com and other podcasts with sound counseling, I guess we can say. He critiques or helps people set up servers, Skype servers or sound boxes so that way they can record their podcast efficiently. And over the last month, a couple of people had sent in some complaints that our level of our volumes are off. Like maybe my voice is lower than the rest, and then Jim speaks and he sounds really loud. And yeah, like that. Thank you. And especially last month when we had all those different social engineers on, the leveling was really difficult. So George offered his help. He gave me a lot of advice, critiques on how to level it out. He suggested a couple programs to do it. and really spent some time with me through email, helping me get set up. So shout out to him. You can check him out on georgestarcher.com if you want any information on George. And thanks, George, for your help. And hopefully this month's audio levels are much better for our listeners here. If you like the outro music, you can check it out on ccmixer.org. The name of the artist is Michael Anthony. Of course, you can check us out on social-engineer.org, Freenode Network, on channel social-engineer, or you can follow us on Twitter at Human Hacker. We look forward to seeing you guys all out in Vegas, and until next month, we'll see you then. Bye.
Just to reiterate, www.exploit-db.com/exploit/14236.
Walk that away. Stay on track. Walk on. Watch your back. Walk on. Stay on track. Walk on. Watch your back. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. When I'm thinking about the times you see, talking about every single day. 2 steps forwards and 1 step back. Walk on. Trying to remain on track. Yeah. Stay on track. Watch your back. 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 Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. You walk up to the line. Time after time. Thinking things will stay the same. Now the game isn't played that way. You've got to stay on track. Walk on, watch your back. Walk on, stay on track. Walk on, watch your back. Walk on, looking around you and thinking it's okay. Forgetting about the things that you did yesterday. But if you only knew that the game isn't played that way. Stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on.